This is part 2 of a 3-part series. I'd recommend starting with part 1 as it'll make this one even more rewarding.
But if you've just stumbled across this video and want to keep watching, don't worry, you're in exactly the right place.
Because this drawing, this sketch, is about to run a gauntlet. The sketch hasn't changed since the last video, not one line. But if it's ever going to become a real car, almost everything else will. It's easy to assume that after the designer's sketch, the difficult part's all over. The idea exists, the designer has done their job. Now it's simply a case of building it.
No, that would be far too easy.
This sketch is about to leave the design studio and enter a world where every decision has consequences. That front bumper might have to protect a pedestrian. The shape of the bonnet could determine how someone survives in an accident. The roofline has to cut cleanly through the air. The cabin has to fit real people, real luggage, and real components. And eventually, someone has to figure out how to build thousands of them. Every one of those problems has a completely reasonable solution. The trouble is, those solutions don't always agree with each other.
So the real challenge is protecting the original idea while solving every one of those problems.
And that's exactly the journey this sketch is about to go on.
Let's start at the front.
This bumper looks like a styling decision. It isn't. Long before anyone worries about horsepower or Nürburgring lap times, this part of the car has to answer a much simpler question.
What happens if it hits a person?
Modern pedestrian safety regulations dictate how this part of the car behaves in an impact.
How much space you have beneath the bonnet.
How much energy is absorbed. How the front of the car deforms. And suddenly that beautiful low nose the designer sketched has to solve a life-saving problem. And that's only the first challenge. Let's move further down the car.
If the first challenge is protecting people outside the car,
then the second one is protecting people inside it. The front structure has to absorb huge amounts of energy in a crash. The windscreen pillars have to stay strong. The passenger cell has to remain intact. Every millimeter matters, and every millimeter changes the design.
Nobody's trying to make the car less beautiful.
They're just trying to make sure you walk away from an accident.
So the sketch has survived 2 challenges, but there are plenty more to come.
Let's keep moving. This roofline looks really elegant, but it's also controlling the way air flows over the entire car. At motorway speeds, air behaves almost like water. It pushes, it pulls, it creates lift and it creates drag. So every curve, every surface, every tiny adjustment can change how the car performs. The designer might want one shape, but the aerodynamicists might need another.
And neither of them's wrong, they're just trying to solve different problems.
Let's move further back.
There's a surprising amount of, well, stuff that has to fit inside the car.
The passengers, the luggage, the suspension, the engine or the motors, the fuel tank or the batteries, the cooling system, the wiring, maybe charging hardware.
Every one of those components is competing for space.
And every one influences the shape, proportions and weight distribution of the car.
By this point, we may be starting to understand why designers become such good negotiators.
Because every conversation starts the same way. What if we just moved this a little? And every tiny change moves the original idea a little further away from the original sketch.
And by now you might be wondering who actually wins. Does the aerodynamicist get their way?
The crash engineers, manufacturing, the packaging team?
The answer is all of them and none of them.
They're all trying to build one car, remember? That's why designers spend so much of their time negotiating. They're trying to make sure every change still belongs to the same idea. So perhaps you used to think the designer's job was creating a sketch.
But in reality, that's just the beginning.
The real challenge is making and influencing thousands of tiny decisions without losing sight of what made the original idea special in the first place. Sometimes that means accepting a compromise. Sometimes it means fighting for a detail that everyone else thinks is insignificant. Because on its own, a single change doesn't seem like much. Move a bumper a little bit, raise the bonnet a little, adjust the roofline a little, package one component differently.
Individually, they all make perfect sense.
But together, they can completely change the character of the car. By the time the car reaches production, probably almost every part of it has changed somehow. The bumper, the bonnet, the roofline, the packaging.
Everyone has been challenged, everyone has been negotiated.
And yet somehow the original idea is still there. Front bumper, roofline, side profile, rear deck, One by one, the sketches become the real car. And finally, here's the finished result. The fascinating thing about automotive design is that the finished car isn't simply the designer's vision, and it isn't the engineer's vision either, or manufacturing's, or aerodynamics. It's the result of thousands of conversations, thousands of compromises, thousands of decisions. And somehow the original idea still survives.
That's why I don't see a Porsche anymore when I look at this.
I see everything it had to survive to become one.
But this leaves us with one final question.
If every production car is the result of thousands of compromises, how do we decide whether it's actually good design? And that is the final part of the story.